and welcome to the latest show. Tonight on the show we have two very special guests. Bestseller author and Nobel Prize receiver Kazuo Ishiguro and literature critic Jade Sven. And now please have a seat.
Thank you very much.
If I may ask, how are you two doing this evening?
Why, thank you for asking. Yes, I'm doing very well indeed. I've been looking quite forward to coming on to your show.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to meet you and be on this show.
Well, that's good to hear. This is, after all, the latest show. Huh. Well, let's get down to business. Where do you get your inspiration for the book from?
I'm glad you asked. You see, it's quite a peculiar story. You see, the other day, I was reading through a science newspaper, or well, not really a newspaper, magazine, more likely. And I saw this article about designer babies and gene editing and the moral and ethics behind the subjects. And then I went down a strange road of associations, which eventually led me to the idea of, yeah, I know it's going to sound weird, producing clone babies to harvest, to have organs at the ready for organ transplants.
Interesting. And now, if I may ask, what was your intention with Never Let Me Go?
I'm glad you asked. You see, I think people don't realize that the ones you care for and love for may not have all the time in the world. I think people need to realize that the time we have to spend with our loved ones is limited, and therefore we should spend as much time as we can, and the time we spend should be spent wisely, instead of always postponing a visit to your parents, as an example.
I had the same feeling about it, but it could also have something to do with the ethics of being of clones. Are clones real humans and living beings, or are they just a product of someone's factory or something? And is it okay to use them just as organ donors to help out those who are ill?
So, you chose Kathy H to be the narrator, but I wonder, why is that? Kathy's memories likewise show her as being afraid of conflict, or avoidance of it, especially when it comes to her emotions. For instance, when she feels anger for Ruth, she often just walk away rather than confronting her. So I wonder, why chose a so passive soul to be the narrator?
Exactly because of that, because she is passive. I don't want the narrator to be in the spotlight. I want the world to. I want people to, instead of being focused on the main character, to instead experience joy and wonder at the world I created in my book. I want people to wonder at why things are the way they are, and to wonder about the intention of the book, as we discussed before. So by choosing a more passive narrator, I hope to achieve a more intense fixation, I guess you could call it, on the world.
To me, it seems that in most sci-fi genre novels, there are often used a lot of scientific terms to create some sort of believability. Let's say an illusion of reality. Instead of using scientific jargons, you use sort of simplified words, such as carrots, donuts, and so on. But how come you're not using any scientific jargons? So, you chose Kathy H to be the narrator, but I wonder, why is that? Kathy's memories likewise show her as being afraid of conflict, or avoidance of it, especially when it comes to her emotions. For instance, when she feels anger for Ruth, she often just walk away rather than confronting her. So I wonder, why chose this so passive soul to be the narrator?
Exactly because of that, because she is passive. I don't want the narrator to be in the spotlight. I want the world to. I want people to, instead of being focused on the main character, to instead experience joy and wonder at the world I created in my book. I want people to wonder at why things are the way they are, and to wonder about the intention of the book, as we discussed before. So
Interesting.
by choosing a more passive narrator, I hope to achieve a more intense fixation, I guess you could call it, on the world.
At the beginning of the book, we were introduced to the word donor, making us, readers, realize that something is not quite right. Yet, for most part of the book, it progressed normally. For instance, the school life of a teenager seemed fairly normal, with some oddities sprinkled on.
Det tæller godt, det så siger jeg ikke så.
God idé, god idé. This sort of pattern is repeated throughout the story. Your style of writing seems to preference this sort of sugarcoating. But why not just say it as it is? Just instead of this ring around the rosy. This sort of pattern is repeated throughout the story. Your style of writing seems to preference this sort of sugarcoating. But why not just say it as it is?
I don't like to give people the answers from the get-go. I think it makes it uninteresting to read if everything is laid out on a silver plate from the beginning. So what I wanted to do was to make people work a bit more to uncover this information. I wanted people to think about it, as well as not just have it served on a silver plate, but to amplify the idea of a personalized experience. So if I say it as it is from the get-go, I tell people that's just the way it is, you can't do anything about it, that's how it is. But by doing this instead, I give people the opportunity to interpret what I've read, and therefore have stronger feelings about the book, and therefore enjoy it more.
It also plays with your curiosity. Well, in the start we get introduced to the donors and a carer, which Kathy is, but we don't know what a donor is and why Kathy is a carer, and why she's been a carer for longer than normal carers have been. And it plays with the curiosity that drives you to read the book further.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
find out the answers, to see what is these donors, why is there's something important in this book. And even when the donors have been when we find out what the donors are, there's still something that can drive us more to find more answers, like the gallery, Madame, why she's taking all the art, and why art is so important on Hailsham.
When I read this book, I was quite surprised Kathy and Tommy never tried to escape into the real world. They sort of just clinged on this possibility of the pharaoh. Even after they figured out that the pharaoh was made up, they still sort of cling to it. But why did they never try to change their fate, escape into the real world? I mean, my take on it is that people sort of just accept their fate without even trying to change it. Especially as we've seen in the book, Kathy and Tommy never even tried to escape into the real world. They sort of just cling to this possibility of the pharaoh, even after they found out that the pharaoh wasn't real, it was made up. They still sort of cling to this. So ultimately, I think this novel is a symbol of just our lifespan. We sort of just live, and then we ultimately die.
Yeah, what I think is that these, these, I guess we'll just call them clones. These clones, okay, we could perspectivate this to sailors of old, the sailors of old, their view of the world as being a plane, a flat earth. The clones think of the real world as their edge of the world. if you were a sailor, you would never even think about going to the edge of the world because all kinds of unfathomable things could happen to you. Some thought there were monsters, some thought it was just a deep, dark abyss you would fall to your death. Some actually thought you would just fall. There really was nothing outside of the earth. That clings together with the idea of the sky being a ball above the earth, but that's irrelevant. So I don't think they ever actually ever very like seriously wondered about or thought about escaping the well psychological torture in reality they were enduring and go into the real world and get integrated there. I don't think they ever thought about it because they saw it as the edge of the world. Why would they? It's death.
Agreed.
Well, there's also there's the part that they knew about the outside world. Like in Hellsham, one talks about being a movie star over in America. So they knew about the outside world. Maybe there were some restrictions and laws that prevented them from going out of Britain and trying to get a normal life like all other people. But in a philosophical way, it makes sense that their life have been made for them, a path that they need to follow, and there's no change in changing that now.
How did it change our characters growing up at Hillsham? At first, it seemed like an idyllic environment to grow up and get an education. Later, though, as the truth is revealed, it sort of changed the whole perspective. So how did it change our characters?
I don't think they were changed much or affected. I mean, as I wrote, the truth wasn't revealed to them per se. It was more or less just hidden beneath a bunch of difficult words that are difficult to small children anyway. So I don't think that it was necessarily shocking to them as such. It was just more or less taboo until they became older. The donoring parts at the very least. I mean, they were very interested about finding a potential, what they call them, double. Yeah, the models they were cloned from. Possible, right? So I don't think there was much of a waking up moment per se. I think it was more or less didn't change them much. I think the first time the realization dawned on them was seeing their seeing their classmates die after donating, finishing.
It also adds to the part that Hellsham was like the good old days, the days where they were kids and didn't need to worry about all the things that was going to happen in the future, like donations. They didn't know what the donation really meant for them, and why they were not allowed to smoke and a lot of other things. So like a flashback to the good old days, like when they are at the stage where they're going to donate. They think about hail shame too, and think about all the things that they have had back then, and the good life they had there.
The story is set in a recognizable England in the late 20th century, yet it contains dystopian elements, implying that it might be in the future. So, did it ever cross your mind to set the story in the future?
On several occasions, actually. Nonetheless, I always arrived at the same conclusion. It would take a bit away from the relatability of the story. It would make it less recognizable, you might say. So I ultimately scrapped the idea of setting it in the future.
And, as you earlier mentioned, art seems to be a returning motive of Never Let Me Go, but I wondered, why is that? You think that the more physical aspect of their body should be their main focus point, but they still focus on the art, the more artistical side of their students, clones, as you call them. But why so?
Well, as I okay, so I read, right, or I wrote that Hailsham was special because it was really an experiment of sorts, that they were trying to figure out if these clones actually had souls, to debate the ethics of what they were doing. Um, you know the saying, art provokes, right? Well, we can deduce from that that if art provokes, then it must reveal something about the person enjoying it or the person making it, because if it provokes, it must affect them in some way. So I think of art as being able to reveal something about the creator of it. Some details you might not you might be trying to get confirmed in this case, or to get uncovered maybe in other cases.
Mm. What is the point of telling a story out of order? It sort of comes in parts, as you may say, and it often relates to Kathy's flashbacks, her memories, and flash forwards. But wouldn't it have made more sense to just have told it straightforward?
No, I like the idea, basically, really just from a storytelling perspective, to have the story being told first in past tense by Kathy, reciting from her diary, or perhaps while writing her diary, writing down the events that have led up to her life being as it is, to sort of tell someone about her life. It also adds a bit of sincerity to the story. To the story, I think.
It also adds to the mystery, like with the donors. We don't know what the donors is. It'll be quite strange if we get the name donors in the middle of Hailsham. Just it'll feel awkward for the story to just have it shoved in just in the middle of Hailsham and just be there and oh well, donors. What are those?
Mm.
Yeah, sure, I can see that. I can see that.
Why does Tommy draw animals? Of all the things he could have drawn, he draws animals. Furthermore, why does he continue to draw animals even after they find out the deferral was made up?
You see, I think I wanted to get Tommy's character across, and I was wondering how to do it. You see, Tommy is a very gentle and friendly person. You could almost see him as slightly naive. I thought the drawing animals would really get this across, like drawing small, cute little animals. But then I thought that might be a bit too naive, so I introduced the idea of having a more adult, more artsy expression of a very detail dense animals with lots of little quirks and characteristic expression through these animals. I think Tommy, if I were to look at it from Tommy's perspective, I would think that these are an outlet for his frustrations. I think he hides some frustrations about the life he's living, and these come to full view after they get the deferral turned down. Or well, there were no things such as deferrals, but that scene where he goes out and screams out his anguish into the night, I think it really gets the frustrations he's feeling across. So
I feel Tommy as a character was more like a supporting character, even though he was one of the main characters. He will like give or take pointlessly throughout the big part of the book. But in the third act, he will become way more of a big part of this story and have a big chunk to do with the deferrals and well, with Kathy too, the romance between them, and will evolve into one of these main characters.
Mm.
absolutely.
As we progress through the story, our main characters seem to grow from their high school cliqueness, as as you may call it, but still seems sort of flat to me. Additionally, every character seemed irredeemable, gullible, and naive, so why not make Kathy, Tommy, and Ruth grow as characters throughout the story?
Well, as I have said, I wanted the world to be the main focus. So I know it could seem a little bit of a complex world I have created. So I wanted some sort of anchor to make the readers not feel lost in the world I have created. So that's why I decided not to make them have any significant character arcs about the story. I mean, you could argue that Ruth had a redemption arc in the latter part of the story.
Agreed. And to round it all off, what am I meant to get out of this book?
Well, apart from feeling the feeling of joy and wonder at the world I created, I want people to start and think about how am I using my time, my life? Am I doing what I want to be doing with my life? Am I spending my life with people I want to spend it with?
Agreed. Books should always be enjoyable and give you something to wonder about. But it could also do something about the discussion about cloning and the ethical part of it. Like the problem with just using them to donate organs. And in the future might be able to take this book and look at the ethical part of cloning.
And that's all we have time for today on today's show. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope I see you next time.